Welcome, everyone. This is the Oneness Center for Spiritual Living, and as Brian and I always love to say as we start our talk, no matter who you are, no matter where your life has taken you, what that journey has been, we are an open, loving, diverse spiritual community, and you are welcome here. And so good morning. And last week, I was guest speaking elsewhere. This week, Brian is guest speaking up in Towson at the Baltimore Center. So we've been trading places a little bit. The universe has its way of lining things up. And a lot of times we don't see it until we're in the midst of it, or sometimes looking back as well. And so in December, Julia Mattis came to me and she said, "Would you mind, I'm going to be traveling, would you please conduct the women's group meeting for February?" And the topic is prayer. Now at that point, Brian and I were thinking we were lining up with the national talk themes and topics for the year. And then about 3 weeks ago, there was a new decision made. And we decided we're going to choose our own themes this year. And the theme for February suddenly became prayer. Did you get the connection here? So last Tuesday night, we did this workshop on prayer. And it was fabulous. The people there really enjoyed it. They felt some movement happen even in that short period of time that we shared together. And I know that last week Brian introduced this topic. And he was talking about why do we pray and who do we pray to? I think that was his main focus. Who do we pray to? And sometimes it may seem like we're praying to money or praying to, some other situation. Oftentimes we get caught in focusing on a condition in our life rather than something higher. So in our song this morning, we said, I can see sunshine or I can see a storm. I can see peace or I can see war. And so the conditions are really oftentimes those things that trouble us, that we get sort of really locked into. We're caught in there. There's something tugging us in because that's what's challenging us. And we're on that outer sort of material world, the outer world side of trying to respond to it. But we forget. And prayer draws us back into this, the ability to see the sunshine, even when it's storming outside. We know that sun, even today, and we talked about this several weeks ago, that when we look outside, we see a condition of cloud and rain and wind. But we know above that there is a higher truth, and that higher truth is that the sun, the center of our solar system, is there in every moment, always. And we can lean into that, and we trust that to be true. And the same is true for us in our daily lives, moment to moment, whatever is vexing us, that same truth is there. There is a higher being, a higher power, and a higher truth that we can know for ourselves. And the way we do that, most often, is through prayer. Because remember this, one of the things we truly believe is that thought is the creative process. Thought, not the creative process, but thought is the inception. It is what triggers the creative process. That thought is creational. And we know that from every spiritual tradition. At its root, it believes that that is where the inception begins. Mary Manon Morrissey has this beautiful way of saying it. She says, everything is created twice, first in thought and then in form. And that is a premise, a foundation element. So first order is, as Brian presented last week, who are we praying to? The condition or a higher truth? And he stepped into why do we pray? Because we know and we believe that in oneness of being, with that perfect power and presence that is the source and creator of all creation, of all existence, that we don't have to change God's mind. we pray to change our mind, and we pray to convince ourselves of that higher truth. Because we are in that place of planting that seed that invokes that creative process, that responds always with a yes. Yes, yes, of course. And so we know who we are praying to, and now we know a bit about why. And it is my delight today to speak about how we do this. So remember in January we went through the basics. We went through the thing itself, what it does, how it works, and how we can use it. So today we're going to be talking about how we can use it. And there are times where Ernest Holmes almost creeps into, if he was alive today, he might say this in our parlance, that prayer is like a tool. And, that can be sort of a shock, can it? Because we normally think of prayer as something very sacred, very private, very public when we're in a group together. And yet, remember he always said, he had a radio show, and he would start each episode of the radio show by saying there is a power for good in the universe that we can use for definite purpose. And he also said, do not hesitate to use the law. It is our duty to manifest. And he said there's nothing wrong with using prayer, using the law for personal good. There's nothing more wrong than planting a seed in the soil of the earth and expecting the plant to grow forth. So we know that in oneness with God, we are God in expression. And that creative process is always saying yes. And so here is this beautiful, beautiful practice, spiritual practice, that we can use. And we do that with all sacredness, all honor, and all recognition to the source of creation. Remember, we say, practicing the principles of science of mind. And when we think that every thought is a prayer, we are always praying. Then let's use this more mindfully. And that's really one of the reasons why we pray. So that we can mindfully direct what is going into that creative process and thereby enjoy the fruits of what comes forward in manifestation. So let's start first by saying there's a lot of prayer out there. And by the way, I'm going to be repeating that prayer workshop 2 weeks from today in the afternoon in Oneness Hall. So I welcome all of you. We had a blast with it. It was really light and lively, and not the heavy take on it, but the fun take on it and the get real take on it. So one thing we know is that there's so many forms of prayer. The simplest wish, the simplest, that's fabulous, is a prayer of gratitude, isn't it? There are many forms of it, but we tend to have a more specific form. And it's not a must-do. It's not under the thumb, right? It's not a must-do. But it's something that we do. And so let's talk about why we have this form that we like to practice together. And we'll go into the details of that. For one thing, there are many forms of prayer, as I just said, but a lot of them that are more common in the world often come from a place of separation. And I'm not going to go into the detail on this right here this morning. We can do that in the workshop a little bit more. But a lot of them are of the sort of, they fall along the lines of beseeching, let's make a deal, the negotiating type of prayer. Then there's another type of prayer in which it's like, I've really been good. I've really been doing all my work. So where is it? A number of these. And, we've all been there. Let's be honest about this. We have all been there. My back's to the wall, sort of prayer. Sometimes in this movement we call it the God damn it prayer. Really. And sometimes we just have to get to that point. One thing that happens when we're there, we are clear. We are incredibly clear, and we're incredibly definite at that point. The power is really focused, and it's lined up with our emotions, right? So let's not rule it out entirely, but let's use it properly, okay? But we have a different type of prayer, and we call it affirmative prayer, because instead of being from this disempowered place where we're begging, we're crying, we're trying to logic our way, we're trying to convince God to change its mind, instead of praying from that place of lack and victimhood and whatever's going on, we come into alignment with that perfect power and presence. We recognize that we are part of that. We are God in expression. And this perfect power and presence is always saying yes. It does not withhold itself. Joel Goldsmith said, I think it was Joel Goldsmith, said, God withholds nothing. That became my mantra last year. God withholds nothing. Well, if God is withholding nothing, then where is it? Oh, maybe part of it is in my wheelhouse here. Maybe part of it is my part to be letting this come in. And if that's the case, let me be in prayer about what is it that I need to shift? How do I need to change my consciousness? What do I need to convince myself of so that it is, of course. And I'm in that allowing place that I can receive it. So when we do affirmative prayer, we are praying from oneness with Spirit. We are praying from that place of oneness of being. And we are praying from that place that we know from the New Testament, from the work, the ministry of Jesus, that it is done unto us as we believe. It is done unto us as we believe. So what am I believing? Every thought that's going out there, what am I believing? And if the law, that creative process, is always saying, yes, here it is. Yes, here it is. Just like in a restaurant. Unless they've run out of something, when we order something off the menu, they say yes, they go off and do something, and they come back and they say, here it is, right? And the law does the same thing. God withholds nothing, doesn't question us, doesn't limit us. And you know that story about the fisherman who, I've told this before, who would catch a big fish, measure it, and throw it back into the river. And somebody was watching and said, wait, what are you doing? Normally when people catch a big fish, they keep it as a prize. And he said, well, I only have a 10-inch frying pan. And the fish was too big to fit in it. That's a belief system. But we can go to something greater, and we can know that that something greater is going to accommodate everything else that needs to come along with it. So our form of affirmative prayer is from that place that is so core in our principle, that it is done unto us as we believe. So we affirm what it is that we believe. And we're going to talk about the Anatomy of Affirmations, and those who have had class with me before know that this is something that we work on, because it is so central to our work of prayer. But our form of prayer also has another benefit. And that is, it's something we recognize. We can rally around it. As soon as we hear someone praying in this manner, we click into it instantly. We know what's going on. And we are right there with it. And so it is something that not only bonds us, but creates a resonance that brings us into that powerful place where two or more are gathered and we are aligned. We are aligned in our manner, our practice of prayer. And by the way, we're going to find out very quickly This form of prayer embodies our principles. It's this beautiful mechanism that when we look at the steps and we start to put them to use, that what we are doing is we are really practicing our principles. Just by the simple act of praying, we are doing what we call for in our mission statement, practicing the principles of science of mind. Every single prayer. And so it is that reminder, it is that experiential component in a teaching that is really abstract for most people. It brings it down to earth. We bring it to earth as we use it. And we can use it. So there's a word here. And it's a word that's typically an ouch sort of word. And if you're a creative person, I'm sort of in that bent of being creative. It's a word that we sort of bristle about and try and push away from. And yet, even creative people, typically, whatever creative medium you're in, there is a process for that as well. There's skills and there's ways that you apply it. The same is true for prayer for us. And that is, some people say it's a formula. That's that word, formula. And it feels rigid, doesn't it? That term might feel a little bit constraining, or it might feel like, oh, gee, am I doing it right, sort of thing. Do I have to use certain words? And all of those things that we can freak out about a formula. Well, it's not a formula that is like a chemistry experiment where it has to be so precise and so measured and so forth. It's more a process. So, like a recipe that says stir all the dry ingredients together before you add the liquid. It's sort of that type of process more than a specific formula. And then we hear things about the 3-step, the 5-step, the 7-step. We're not learning a dance here, but maybe we could think of it as a dance. And that just sort of adds, when we were in the learning process, that can add some angst to, did I do it right? Did I remember every step? Did I use the right words in the right place? And it's the funny thing, what we all do when we're learning something new, we're very vigilant, we're very aware. And then something happens at some point where it becomes natural. It becomes second nature. And that's when it really can start to get rich. Not that it can't get rich earlier, but when we're really in that sweet spot, that we're in the flow, that we're in that connection. So let's go through those basic steps as a reminder, as a teaching tool here this morning. And know that wherever you are, beginner or somebody who's been with the teaching and in prayer work for many, many years, the reminders are always fresh, they're always good, and they always help us take it past a plateau to the next level. So where do we start? Step 1. And by the way, all these wonderful flowering and articulate prayers that we are blessed with on Sunday mornings and with practitioners and with our ministers, that's years of practice coming forward, and that's being in that sweet spot and that flow. And a lot of times I don't remember what I said in the prayer. It was really, in a state of consciousness. But it can be this simple. God is, I am, we are, I know, whatever I want to know or claim. Thank you. I release it, and so it is. It can be that simple. Those are the rock bottom fundamentals. And so let's take those steps. We've got 5 fingers. We're going to do 5 steps today. Okay? First one, recognition. What are we recognizing? Anyone? We're recognizing. Remember last week Brian was talking about who are we praying to? We're recognizing who we're praying to. That's where recognition is. And how many of you meditate? Quite a few. or some other process that you have, in which, there is this point where you sort of pause. I don't want to really use the word separating, but you've chosen, I have this interlude of time and I'm choosing to do this. And so what I was doing before, I am putting on pause. And there's sort of this segue where we start to switch gears and we recenter. Recognition is one of those steps. And for meditation, for example, we've been busy in the outer world. And in meditation, we have this initial phase where we start to center, we start to get calm, we start to come into a different place, a different alignment in the world than when we're out driving or at work or wherever. So recognition helps us to do that. It says, wait a minute. Hello, God. I'm here to talk to you again. Hello, God. Hello, incredible power of the universe. However you choose to language it, it is that step of recognizing, who am I praying to? And what is the power that is there? It's a recognition of our principle of what we believe is that ultimate source of creation. And even though we say it's ineffable, undescribable, it helps for us to align by recognizing what we ascribe to that perfect power and presence that is absolute, infinite, eternal, everywhere present in every moment, in every situation, and ever at the ready. However we choose the verities of God, however we choose to language it, the first step is recognizing, who are we praying to? Step 2 is unification. So it's recognizing who we are in the midst of all of this. And I'm going to add something else there. It's not only recognizing who we are as a divine being, a spiritual being having a human experience, an emanation of God in form, but it is also the idea, I've recognized who I am praying to, my place in this realm, but also who I am praying with. Because in every prayer, we are not just praying by ourselves. In oneness with Spirit, we are praying with Spirit. We are Spirit living through us. We are that place where God stands forth. In unifying with that Supreme Being, we are also saying, not only do I have faith in God, I have the faith of God. And that's the foundation from which I pray. So who am I praying with? Now, our prayer, and this came out, somebody was chuckling about this in the workshop on Tuesday, because it's like we have several phases at the front end of our prayer and then a couple at the back end. And then we have this cream filling in the middle. And the cream filling is what we all love, right? Unless you like the crunch part. But and the crunch part is good too. But that cream filling can be any flavor we want. It can be gratitude, it can be joy, it can be what we're striving for, what we're recognizing as our power, even though we hadn't recognized it before. That cream filling can have any flavor. And this person said, "Whoa, you know what? When I heard you say this, it's like my mind went right out to a communion wafer, but you have an Oreo cookie instead of a communion wafer." And so what is that cream filling? The cream filling is the affirmative part. We call it affirmative prayer, right? It's where we declare what we really know as our truth, despite the clouds and rain, the storm out there. It's where we declare what we really, truly know. And why do we call it affirmative? And this is where the anatomy comes in, the anatomy of affirmations. There's 3 components, and they're really important to keep in mind. So I'll tell you, first of all, this is like an exercise routine. How, the form you don't want, like the alignment and so forth, if you were watching some exercise guru. So we're not complaining, and we're not focusing on the condition, because the condition is a result. It's not where the power is, right? So it's not the condition, it's not complaining, it's not being the, oh, woe is me, having the pity party. That's not what we're affirming, because do we want more of that? No. So let's affirm what we want more of and what we want to be receiving. So an affirmation has several components. First of all, it's in the first person. I. If it's a group of us, we. And it's a positive statement. In the present tense, as if it is already done, as if it is already received. And this is sort of not it will be, I will. It's like I am, not I will, I plan on, I hope to. I am. It is a claim. It is a declaration. It is an affirmative, powerful declaration. And the interesting thing here is that not only are we clear on who we're praying to, who we are praying with, right? But we are also clear that we are empowered, because it is our affirmation, it is our thought that is invoking the creative process on our behalf. It is done unto us as we believe. And so we say, okay, God, I am here, and together we are knowing this is my truth. That was the first two steps right there, that simple statement. We are knowing this as my truth, whatever that is. So that is the cream filling. That is why we call it affirmative prayer. And we are empowered by this, because we are in oneness with God. We are not from a place of lack, of limitation, of hoping that the rescue mission is going to arrive. It's not the let's make a deal. It is claiming that truth of our being, that birthright as a spiritual being, that we are God in expression. And so that cream filling, boy, it could be a really plump Oreo cookie. Or it can be as skinny as you want it on the low-fat, version. That's up to you, how much you put in that cream filling, okay? But then we want the other side of the Oreo, right? And one of the key things we all do, and it always opens our heart and feels so good, is whenever we receive, where do we go? We go in joy and gratitude. For we are about to receive, and the gift of life, the gift of spirit, the gift of working with spirit and being in that oneness of being, that in itself is enough to celebrate and be grateful for. And so that is our next phase, is to just be in that place of sweetness and gratitude, powerful gratitude, exuberant gratitude, whatever kind of gratitude you want. Just be thankful. And then the final phase is the release, the letting go. And this is, sometimes we think, okay, I let it go, but did we really? So let's think about that seed, and we planted it in the soil, and we put it in the sun, and we're watering it. Where is it? Nothing's broken ground. So do we at some point go digging around to see, hey, are you still there? Are you doing anything? No. And if we had released, we would have just said, okay, fine. It just hasn't sprouted yet, but I know it is. I know it's working. Now, I also like to give this anecdotal story because I think it's a little more memorable too. So we go into a restaurant, right? First of all, we recognize the restaurant we want to go to, and we go there and we get seated, and we look at the menu. And the affirmative part is we say, I want this. We place our order, right? That's the cream filling part, the affirmative part. And then what happens? The waiter goes off. Now, we've released that order. And this is something we rehearse, we practice a lot, continually. And so we have faith in this. That, okay, I placed that order. I know the waiter, waitress is going to send it into the kitchen, and the kitchen's going to cook it up and bring it and serve it up to me, right? What we don't do in a restaurant is place the order and then think, gee, I wonder if that waiter ran off with my order and had to go, move his car and the cook doesn't have it, right? Do we get up in the restaurant and go into the kitchen and push the cook out of the way and cook it up ourselves? No, we don't do that, right? We trust that the order was taken. It's in that mysterious process, like the law, in the kitchen. Somebody's cooking it up, and here it comes, served to us, right? That is what release is about. It is the trust, the belief of God, the trust of God, the trust that the process is working, that it is responsive to us, that it is given in measure to what we have asked and are willing to receive. That is what the release really is. It's, other parlance is we get out of its way. We get out of our own way. We turn it over. And that's what the release is. So, 5 steps. First is recognition. Second one, third, cream filling, affirmation. Fourth, fifth, release. It is that simple. There we've unpacked it. And as Ernest Holmes said, we can use it for a definite purpose. And in fact, let's remember that we are in every moment using it, whether we're aware of it or not. And that's what we call creating by default. Because when we're on autopilot, we still are having thoughts. Those thoughts are still creating in our life, right? We may not even be aware of what we're thinking or how affirmative, in the sense of, is it bringing us our next highest good? And so we can use this tool, and by recognizing this process, in this case the 5 steps that we adhere to, and understanding why it is so central, that it is actually practicing our principles every time we use it, we can be more mindful, and we can also be more actually productive and successful in that partnership with God. It's a way of leaning in. And every time that we see that being served up to us that we have affirmed, there is such an upwelling of, wow. We learn again and again through demonstration the power of this process and the power of our prayer. And so I invite you to join me in this affirmative prayer. Together we know that God is all that is. God is all that really matters. That perfect power, that perfect presence, that one life that we call God, Spirit, Great Spirit. That perfect power and presence that we know by many names is the absolute, infinite, perfect, eternal being from which all creation has come forth. And that includes us. We are God in expression because we are part of God's creation. And that perfect power and presence is with us, as us, for us, through us. And together we lean in. Whatever it is that we are claiming as a greater truth, whether it be for ourselves or another, a greater truth for our family, our company, our country, all humanity. We know that as we are centered in this oneness of being, that wellspring, that affirmative wellspring of all that we can see as a greater good, and knowing that it blesses each and every being, that which is the highest and greatest for all. We affirm that. And we know that God is always saying yes. And for that we are eternally grateful, incredibly grateful. And that is an exuberance that just pours forth from that joyful place of knowing that that which I have called forth, that which I have proclaimed, I know is a greater good inspired by God, and it serves the highest and greatest good of all. And with that gratitude, that overflowing heart of grace and joy, I let it be. I trust it to the law, knowing that it is done. That perfect power, that creative genius that we know God is right now making it so and bringing it forth into our lives with open hearts, allowing this to be our truth. We release it, we let it be, and so it is.